Hello everyone, welcome back. Sorry I've not made a video in a little while, but here we go. The Atlantic is starting to get active again, and we have another system that we need to watch, and this has a 40% chance to develop into a tropical depression or a tropical storm in the next 7 days. Let's go ahead and take a look at some of the models with this storm. So if you're not sure what you're looking at, this is the area that we would be watching. We're going to start this around September 3rd. So here it is right here. But we will keep this going. And this does eventually develop into a tropical storm here as it gets southwest of Puerto Rico, and then could possibly get all the way down to Category 1, maybe low in Category 2 hurricane, as it makes a landfall on Jamaica. At least that's what the GFS model is saying. And then this does strengthen down to most likely a Category 3 hurricane, which should be a major hurricane by this time, as it then makes a landfall in Cuba, and then gets over portions of the Gulf of Mexico, strengthens back down to about a 961 millibar low pressure, and then makes a landfall maybe near Tampa Bay, as this then rides up Florida and then gets into portions of Georgia, still as possibly a Category 1, maybe even a low-end Category 2 hurricane, and then it does eventually weaken down to most likely a tropical storm, and then down into a tropical depression as it moves on out of here. But next up is the European model. Once again, our system is right here. Let's start this around September 2nd, and we will keep this going. It kind of weakens a little bit, and then just kind of sits and doesn't really move too much as it is to the south of Puerto Rico. But we will keep this moving. And then this does ride over portions of Jamaica, but doesn't really develop anything. But a few runs back, this had actually been showing a strong hurricane, but it's not showing that anymore. But we will have to watch for that to come back. But next up is the Canadian model. This actually strengthens it a lot faster. So here's our system back here, not even in the Caribbean yet, and this shows it as most likely a tropical depression, but it actually weakens a little bit and then strengthens itself back up to about a tropical storm as it moves west, and then strengthens into most likely a Category 1 hurricane, maybe even a low in Category 2 hurricane, as it then makes a landfall to the west of Puerto Rico. Sorry, I do not know these island names too well, but it does make landfalls, most likely a tropical storm in Cuba, and then starts to strengthen and could maybe strengthen back to a hurricane, as it then most likely shows a landfall somewhere near Miami on the Canadian model. But next up is the Icon model. Here's our system back here once again. Most likely is just a tropical wave, but could be a tropical depression. It seems to just kind of maintain tropical wave status as it then starts to strengthen to most likely a tropical storm. But it does strengthen a lot slower, but it does possibly strengthen all the way down to a hurricane as it is to the southwest of Puerto Rico. And Puerto Rico I will highlight right there. That's not a good color. But Puerto Rico right there where I'm pointing that arrow. But next we will look at our current watches, warnings, and advisories from the National Weather Service. We have a few areas of a heat advisory, one down in portions of Alabama, Mississippi, and Arkansas, and then another one in portions of North Carolina and Virginia as well. And then we have another area back in portions of Illinois and Missouri, and then another one back in portions of West Virginia and Ohio. We actually had some snowfall a few days ago back in Montana, up in that area, so that was pretty interesting to see. But next up, our current our current warnings, we have an area of showers and storms from portions of Texas all the way up to portions of Mississippi and Louisiana, and then another area back in portions of Florida with some showers and storms that are actually sparking a few special marine warnings for waterspouts and strong winds, and then another area of showers and storms back in portions of Kansas and Nebraska, and then another area in portions of Minnesota. But next up is the Storm Prediction Center. This is the day 1 outlook, and we have a slight risk of severe weather in portions of Minnesota and Iowa, with a 5% tornado risk. That does include Minneapolis, Minnesota, and then a 2% tornado risk surrounding that. That does include La Crosse. And then there's a 15% wind risk and then a 15% hail risk. But there's also a marginal risk back in portions of North Carolina, Virginia, West Virginia, Maryland, and portions of Pennsylvania with a 5% wind risk and a 5% hail risk. And there's actually a less than 2% tornado risk over there too. And then there's a day 2 marginal risk that extends all the way from portions of Missouri up to the U.S.-Canadian border with less than a 2% tornado risk, a 5% wind risk, and then a 5% hail risk. And then there's also a day 3 marginal risk that does include portions of Pennsylvania, New York, Maryland, Virginia, West Virginia, and Ohio with a 5% severe weather risk as well. But I would like to mention, sorry we're going to do this here on the fly, where it says potential too low. That means there's not really a big severe weather risk, but when it gets to the predictability too low, that's kind of a bump up from the potential too low. So we will need to watch for possibly some severe weather into day 7 and day 8. But with that, one more look at our tropical system here. 40% chance to develop into a tropical depression or tropical storm in the next 7 days. This is moving 10 to 15 miles an hour westward. But we will definitely need to watch for development of this system as it will become more likely as it moves west. Sorry for all the stutters, I guess you could say. But thank you for watching. I'll see you on the next one, everybody. Have a good one.